Thank you for joining the ISG Smart Talk, Modernize Your Legacy Applications to Accelerate Your Digital Transformation. Our hosts for today's talk are Ron Exler, Principal Analyst, ISG Research, Stanton Jones, Director and Principal Analyst, ISG Research, and special guest Rich Crone, President of AveriSource. This ISG Smart Talk is being recorded, and the replay will be available to share with your colleagues at the same link as the live event you're listening to now. Feel free to submit a question at any time during the presentation by using the Ask a Question box on the left side of your window. And if we don't get to your question during the webinar, or if you're listening to a recording of this broadcast, we'll answer your questions in a follow-up email. With that, I will hand things off to Ron to kick off today's ISG Smart Talk.
Thank you, Jillian, and welcome everyone. I'm Ron Exler with ISG Insights, which is a part of ISG Research. Insights does primary research focused on enterprise digital transformation. Insights provides a suite of deliverables via subscription to help enterprises understand the market, adoption of emerging technologies and trends, how enterprises compare to this adoption, and what steps they need to take to improve their capability. We have a great group on this webinar to share our ideas about the important link between legacy modernization and digital transformation. Everyone has been touched in our daily lives by what are now called legacy systems. Some of us had it touch us in our careers. One of my early positions was product manager for a COBOL code generator. We promoted on-time and on-target delivery. Since then, I've worked with and for enterprises and providers at the confluence of business and technology. Stanton understands the service provider community as well as anyone, and Rich has decades of experience in legacy application modernization. We hope this discussion leads to interaction from you during the Q&A session today, and feel free to contact us after. I'll begin by walking through application modernization and the linkage with digital transformation for enterprises. Stanton will discuss why service providers are important in these initiatives. Rich will wrap up discussing how AveriSource tackles legacy source code analysis and business rule extraction to support digital transformation. After Rich finishes, we'll answer your questions. Amongst legacy systems, for decades, mainframes have been computing workhorses across industries and all over the world. Many are still used, sometimes appropriately, yet they can slow an enterprise's ability to respond to rapid digital business changes. Enterprises need greater flexibility of systems, processes, and organizations to adjust products and services at the pace required to meet market demands. Mainframes reflect a monolithic design, primarily using batch processing, which makes them expensive to change. So for many years, people have been selectively moving mainframe processing to more modern and flexible platforms. Enterprises make the shift in three main ways. They license software, such as ERP and CRM, that offer robust capabilities maintained and enhanced by the vendors. Rewriting happens when the application has a high level of customization or unique capabilities. Integrating with other newer applications is another approach that can be right for some mainframe applications or components. Enterprises are changing to focus on innovation and agility to remain competitive and relevant. Legacy applications at the core of many businesses delay the necessary changes. Even with modern DevOps tools, the tightly coupled monolithic nature of most legacy systems does not lend itself to supporting the creation of a minimum viable product, collaborative development, or automation of integration and deployment. The challenges create risk, add costs, and slow business velocity. When we asked enterprises about these barriers in our late 2018 Agile study, they cited legacy technology the most in their 3 top barriers to adopting Agile. But why? Because people expect modern experiences that offer instantaneous response, intuitive and fun interfaces, good service, and personalization. People expect fast, personalized, and transparent interactions because they are accustomed to digital technology experiences on their smartphones, tablets, and smart TVs. Access limitations, slow response times, blocked data, or confusing interfaces lead to frustration and service inadequacy. Plus, changing legacy applications is expensive and slow when there's poor source code documentation and inadequate skills available to do the work. A lack of that documentation, along with the departure of professionals with domain and application expertise, means enterprises seeking to address digital transformation struggle to find and repurpose core business logic to support the future state. While there is debate over the extent of the skills shortage, mainframe skills are certainly not on the syllabus in many universities, and it is undeniable that the skills base will continue to shrink by attrition. One recent estimate is that only around 10% of people with mainframe skills are under the age of 30. There's also a struggle with integration between disparate systems and their applications. These integrations are complex and costly to maintain. All of these factors add risk while slowing down operations. But why should enterprises worry about going digital in the first place? Based on ISG's recent digital capability survey, the evidence is clear. Those companies investing in digital strategies are reaping quantifiable benefits. They see increased revenue, customer retention, and increased operating efficiency. Almost all of the enterprises in our data pool see an increase in their revenues from their digital initiatives. On average, a firm's revenue has increased by almost 6% over the last 2 years. More than 90% of enterprises have seen an improvement in customer retention at a time when that is a growing problem for many businesses. And almost 90% of enterprises have had digital initiatives reduce their OpEx. In many cases, ISG clients and others have seen value extraction from all 3 areas. When you consider how difficult it is for companies to grow in this highly competitive environment, these gains represent significant improvement. Most of the world looks at digital transformation as a program or project with a focus on building something. There's not enough focus on the long-term view and our realization of benefits. Therefore, we think that it is more useful for our clients to think of digital transformation as a capability that has to be put together instead of a project that has to be executed. So we pivot from projects and programs to constructing capabilities that continuously reach outcomes. To clarify digital transformation, ISG developed the digital cube that we show here broken into its 6 sides or domains. ISG's digital capability model enables our clients to create a foundation for sustained and scalable digital innovation and agility. Any enterprise, regardless of size, needs to have these 6 capabilities to achieve any digital ambition they might have. The digital cube is a simple way to visualize these 6 capabilities coming together. While application modernization can touch all 6 domains of the model, 3 stand out. An optimized digital backbone is the adoption of modern architectures based on microservices and APIs, the embrace of the cloud, and new data and analytic techniques to drive a better understanding of customers and the business. Application modernization targets and takes advantage of this digital backbone to connect to and repurpose legacy application components. Enterprise agility is about applying the right delivery model at the right time, so an organization can adopt agile and adaptive operating models to accelerate innovation. Modernizing legacy applications improves flexibility of components to fit an adaptive model and sets the foundation to address digital and infrastructure requirements for the future. Business model innovation enables an organization to build competitive differentiation in today's digital economy. Efficiently repurposing business rules from legacy applications enables businesses to leverage decades of intellectual property to modernize more effectively, be more responsive to change, and improve access and flexibility. Since digital transformation is about building capabilities for long-term benefits, enterprises need a detailed understanding of how existing applications support the business. Only then can they build on existing capabilities to reach desired outcomes listed here. Aligning with changing platforms facilitates faster time to market at lower costs for new products and services. Aligning systems for new markets, channels, and competitors can leverage new revenue opportunities and advance competitive standing. Enabling faster performance and response times, reducing redundancies, and lowering technology total cost of ownership saves money and time. Connecting and integrating previously disjointed or siloed systems, along with simplifying access to cloud-based apps and services, improves application sustainability. Global companies must comply with industry regulations and local laws, so the systems need to be flexible for appropriate customizations. Enterprises are fully aware of the need to modernize to remain competitive. ISG research recently heard from more than 500 large enterprises around the world about their digital capabilities. More than half are modernizing their core systems of record, with most of the rest in trials. Yet those same enterprises lag in capabilities involving a modern target architecture based on microservices. Modern architectures contrast with the typical monolithic legacy architecture. Microservices, for instance, are loosely coupled, modular, and independently deployable with lightweight protocols. These features make them increasingly the architecture of choice for developing software in small teams for digital applications. So they might not be gaining full advantage by, for example, just moving to the cloud. Enterprises know they must modernize, but struggle to establish a future-ready, modern environment. They need help and can benefit from service providers. Now, Stanton will share his thoughts on the role of the service provider in legacy application modernization.
Thanks, Ron.
Stanton?
Thanks, Ron. So given that 70% or so of the Global 2000 uses outsourcing today, it's it's very likely that a service provider will be in the mix in some way or form in your application modernization journey. So as Ron said, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about how they fit into this picture. So let's start with what's happening across the industry first. So many of you are probably well aware that sourcing has changed a lot over the past couple of decades. 20 years ago, in what we call Generation 1 deals, companies focused really on cost reduction, primarily by transferring assets like data centers to service providers. In second generation deals around 10 years ago, the focus was still primarily on cost reduction, but service providers use labor arbitrage instead to get those kind of savings. So today, things are very different. So companies are increasingly using sourcing to do things like get access to digital talent or to globally scale their agile programs and to build digital products. So this means that the way enterprises think about and engage with providers needs to change. So basically it boils down to a lot of behavioral and operational change to realize value in a Generation 3 relationship. And one of the biggest changes is the realization that the contract is a living document, not something to be put into a drawer. So it's, at the end of the day, it's really a set of guardrails that will guide how things like transition execution will occur, but it also accommodates for the fact that there will be a series of transformations throughout the term of the contract. And this is a huge change from the past, where we spent tons of time focused on documenting the current state so that the eventual run state was stable for, say, the next 5 to 7 years. Today, though, 5 years is a lifetime, and if you're focused on keeping your key systems stable for 5 years, you might actually not even be around in 5 years when that sourcing contract is up for renewal, so you really need to think about this differently. And this is especially true when you're talking about legacy applications that support mission-critical business processes. As Ron talked about, these applications are typically supported by folks that have tons of institutional knowledge, but they've been around for a really long time, and they may not want to change or be willing to change. And from an operational perspective, it's unlikely they're using things like agile sprints to update these systems to respond to changing customer needs. So application modernization using a service provider represents a huge change for companies. So let's take a quick look at what you should be looking at in a service provider. So the first thing you need to do is evaluate if your provider is even up for this challenge. Because remember, they need to change their behaviors and operations too to be able to move at digital speed. Some providers have hundreds of thousands of employees, so they are big companies just like many of your companies are, so they have to make these changes as well. So step number one is don't assume that every provider is up to this digital modernization task. So next, you need to evaluate a provider's digital IQ. And really what I mean here is it's a combination of all the things you see on this list below. So for example, does the provider know your business and your industry? This is critical because successful application modernization creates a linkage between the legacy application and the business. So modernization is not just about changing the underlying technology. It's about making sure that the technology platform you choose supports the new business models your company may have already or may be developing in the future. So understanding your business and your industry is really critical because at the end of the day, there's very few service providers in the world that are deep in every industry. In fact, many providers have decided to specialize in specific sub-industries like, for example, wealth management or life sciences or discrete manufacturing. So it's important to keep this in mind as you're evaluating your provider's digital IQ. They should understand your industry as well as you do. It's also critical that when you're selecting a modernization partner to recognize that this is not just a re-platforming exercise, though that is, as Ron mentioned, that's one of the options, re-platforming. But in our view, that a lot of the time, that's not really going to move the needle on your digital transformation because it's really focused on reducing cost, not reevaluating the link between the application and the business model. So we think that it's important that your provider understands new approaches to modernization like microservices and APIs, those kinds of architectures. And finally, it's critical that your provider has a deep ecosystem of other providers and technology vendors. One of the key tenets in today's economy is a recognition that most companies can't get to where they need to be on their own. They need help from you, their clients, and from their ecosystem partners. So when it comes to modernization, you should confirm that your provider has a capability or an ecosystem provider that can automate the process of legacy application analysis and can link these business rules in your applications to the business processes they support. So finally, in terms of getting started on your modernization journey with a provider, it's likely going to look different than many of the relationships you have today or have had in the past. It's really critical that you understand how your applications support your business processes and your business model, because those are the areas, as I mentioned earlier, that are likely changing quite a bit right now. So I encourage you to think about doing this mapping of your legacy applications to your business processes either yourself or do it as a standalone project with a provider. One of the challenges many companies have encountered in generation 1 and 2 relationships is handing over their applications lock, stock, and barrel to a provider with the primary goal of running them cheaper, which means they, in many cases, have no idea how they operate or how they support the business anymore. And frankly, neither does the provider in many cases. So this model used to work when IT was a back office support function, but and we've talked about this a lot in previous Smart Talks, is IT is now the business. So you can't just let these systems wither on the vine. So if you can do this, we think it'll put you in a more control of your sourcing strategy. So if you remember on the previous slide, the sourcing strategy was the precursor to the contract, transition, and transformation. So doing this will enable you to think about this as a series of small transformational projects rather than potentially multi-year engagement where your apps get stuck in the past or where you are overpaying for a set of services that may only apply to a small subset of your applications. So with that, I'm going to turn the call back over to Ron.
Thanks, Stanton. We've discussed how application modernization is a key part of an enterprise's digital transformation and also the important role that service providers can take. Now, I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about what steps enterprises can take in application modernization and how we recommend going about that at a high level. We think appropriate planning starts with thorough portfolio analysis that sets the foundation for an enterprise to address digital business and infrastructure requirements that will carry it into the future. That portfolio analysis, combined with business planning, leads into the execution. In execution, which is shown in step 3 above, there are 5 alternatives that enterprises pursue. For applications with low business value and potentially high maintenance, enterprises should retire some or all components. Retirement typically involves moving the useful functionality, rules, and data to other portions of the application portfolio. For applications important to the business operations but lacking in functional or technology quality, enterprises move useful functionality, rules, and data to existing or new applications with higher functional or technical quality, or to a software as a service solution. For applications with high business value but low non-functional or operational performance, rebuilding can work. This can involve re-architecting or replatforming. APIs can expose certain application components to microservices or applications on other platforms. For applications with higher than desired maintenance or operations costs, it is best for enterprises to reset service levels for fault severity levels. Maintenance or enhancement request priority should shift to be in line with the business value of the application today. And lastly, for applications that could benefit from different sourcing methods, enterprises should evaluate and select alternate sourcing for application hosting, maintenance, or development. This could involve consolidation while rehosting. Throughout this process, business rules extraction and analysis is necessary to get the information needed to move forward. But everything isn't done in one fell swoop. Enterprises that ISG works with manage the risks of modernization using a stepwise process of incrementally modernizing their legacy applications. Incremental modernization involves understanding an application's process flows, dependencies, interfaces, and business logic, and then segmenting them so that each can operate in the modern environment. The modernization team should evaluate the legacy portfolio using business process mapping, application process mapping, data lineage analysis, and business rule extraction from the legacy systems and applications. Gradually, you move the high priority application processes to commercial alternatives or modern frameworks. Remaining legacy processes connect to newer systems by a strong API and a microservices architecture. So it is essential that experienced professionals architect the API layer correctly with a holistic view of the future direction of the environment and how that will support the changing business. Slowly replacing the application portfolio business function by business function in this way reduces risk, expense, and disruption, and provides more immediate opportunities for digital innovation. Software products that can overlay business context into legacy systems and automate the harvesting of business rules are critical to digital transformation, and one of those is AveriSource. Rich will now tell us more.
Hey, thank you, Ron. This is Rich Crone from AveriSource. It's a pleasure to be here talking with all of you today and hopefully getting into some questions and answers. AveriSource's whole business is focused on powering business model evolution for our customers. And by that, we mean that established organizations that have existing applications, legacy systems, those legacy applications tend to be core to their business. Yet they were designed at a point in time 10, 15, 20 years ago or more when the business operated in a different set of realities, right? So in order for the business to continue to remain competitive and agile and at the front of its marketplace, it needs to modernize its business model, which carries with it the requirement to modernize legacy applications. So a little bit about AveriSource. We are a Texas-based company headquartered in Dallas and San Antonio. We also have offices in India, in both Mumbai and Bangalore. We've been in the application modernization business long before it was called digital transformation, about 20 years of experience. We initially started from a viewpoint of doing automated code transformation, take a COBOL application and generate a VB application from it. Technically, we were able to make that work, and in fact, we've got some reference case studies that, for example, Gartner created about the FAA, which was one of our larger customers in years past. But what we found that especially getting into this third wave of outsourcing in the digital transformation market, that it's not a technology problem. It's not that the platform is obsolete and we just need to project the exact same application into a different technology platform. That's not the case at all. The case is more that the business model has changed. Things are moving to more immediate, real-time interaction between customers and a business. And the architectures associated with legacy applications that introduce things like batch processing, sequential processing, just are not relevant in today's real-time or near real-time world where people expect interactions with the companies that are providing products or services to them to be near instantaneous and not to have, legacy batch cycles associated with them. So the whole focus of the company has become on understanding, building on our strength of understanding legacy source code, but now putting it into business context so that the business can evolve their business model, or evolve its business model. There are three primary use cases in the middle of this slide that we cover. The first one is Application Relearn, or ISAT, Interactive Software Analysis Tool for Relearn, which addresses the problem that many organizations we deal with are faced with, and that is that during the financial crisis, they outsourced all of their application maintenance to third-party providers and really drew down any SME knowledge that they had in-house about how their applications worked, because they were trying to take advantage of labor cost arbitrage, as Stanton indicated, and lower the cost of maintaining those applications. So today, when they're faced with looking at, gosh, how do I modernize my business model, and they don't have an understanding of how their business model is enabled or throttled by their existing systems, it becomes very risky and difficult to even get started on a digital transformation journey, because you don't know what your starting point is. So ISAT for Relearn provides a very rapid mechanism of regaining an understanding of your existing applications and enabling a business model to be overlaid on top of them. The second part naturally follows from that, and that's digital transformation planning. Any large organization can have multiple strategies they could execute on in order to meet their strategic goals. The question is, what's the relative cost, benefit, risk associated with each of those initiatives? Again, if those initiatives are tied to legacy applications that are opaque, there's very little visibility into what is the true risk and cost and scope of those projects if the interfaces and dependencies between components is not well understood. So taking the information that is developed in the ISAT and analyzing that information to come up with an optimized digital transformation plan is what the second use case is focused on. So that if somebody has a budget of $50 million to execute digital transformation initiatives, how do I make sure that I'm getting maximum value from that budget and spending that money on the most high impact initiatives possible? The digital transformation planning use case enables that to be addressed in typically an 8 to 12 week kind of time frame. The final part is actual digital transformation initiatives. And we focus on identifying business rules within legacy applications that are associated with high-value IP that the organization has developed over time within its legacy applications. It is not uncommon at all to see customers that customers have spent 100,000, 300,000, 400,000 hours in building up a single legacy application over time. You would think with all that investment of effort that, gosh, there sure must be some intellectual property that's been injected or designed into that application over time. The challenge is, how do you separate how do you find the needle in the haystack, right? You don't want to get lost in looking at 10 million lines of source code if there's only 100,000 lines or 1 million lines of code that contain that valuable IP. We bring focus to that effort so that it's a concentrated mining activity for those business rules, and we bring automation to bear on that initiative as well. We will frequently see a 30-fold productivity increase in business rule mining activities compared to manual approaches that are augmented by utilities. So in addition to the ISAT automatically providing a very thorough understanding of legacy system artifacts, we also find it to be very important to overlay a business context on top of an application. Our business alignment process enables those legacy artifacts to be mapped to business functions within the Interactive Software Analysis Tool, or the ISAT repository. And that provides for a precise understanding of dependencies between and across business functions, so that if an organization wants to modernize, let's say, the loan origination process, they understand directly how loan origination is tied to, let's say, the booking process, for example. So that if you pull one function out and you modernize it or you move it to a microservices architecture, you understand what are the interfaces that need to be addressed in order for that new functionality to work in concert with the functionality that I haven't gotten around to modernizing yet. So we tend to look at a methodology for approaching business rule mining and application modernization or digital transformation initiatives. It begins with defining the scope on what are the parts of the business that I want to look at, and then what are the legacy assets that are likely tied to that. We can then go through a build phase, which is where we build the ISAT repository. So we apply machine learning against that source code so that an analyst can make sense of, potentially hundreds of millions of interrelationships across legacy artifacts, and then analyze that information, overlay it with a business process model so that we can plan out the digital transformation initiatives, and then move into a execution phase where those initiatives are actually realized. Now, part of what we do, you can see on the slide on the bottom left, is to enable one to focus in on what are the aspects of the existing application that truly contain the IP that I want to look at. For example, in a 10 million line of code legacy application, there may be 9 million lines of infrastructure and legacy overhead routines that simply are not likely to contain any IP. We want to make sure that we're not getting lost in the details, and we enable the organization to focus in on the parts of the application that truly contain unique IP. So combining this methodology with the AveriSource ISAT enables us to optimize resources, achieve the greatest cost savings possible, get quick time to market and time to benefit associated with the digital transformation initiatives, and very significantly reduce risk because we understand the dependencies, the landmines, and the complexities at the beginning of a project. We're not discovering those halfway through the project. So how do we recommend that people get started? It begins by defining desired business outcomes, and this doesn't need to be a global definition across the entire organization. Depending upon your budget and how quickly you want to get started, you may pick on a couple business capabilities or a single business capabilities or a set of APIs that you'd like to realize that may be within a couple 100,000 lines of code, so we consider that a quick start kind of program where we're looking to get defined benefits that can be demonstrated and shown to a community to get broader buy-in of the digital transformation journey, within a 3 to 4 month period of time. And that kind of sets the cornerstone of the execution strategy. As the organization gets experience in demonstrating and creating success, we can then build on that and propagate that success across larger initiatives. We certainly would be more than happy to speak with any of the participants on this call about the digital transformation initiatives that you're looking at, and see if there is a way that we can enable you to rapidly conduct a quick start and build your cornerstone for your digital transformation initiative. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Jillian, who I believe is going to lead us through the Q&A.
Yep, thank you, Rich. We do have several questions, and if you haven't submitted yours yet, please feel free to do so. All right, the first question. Can you recommend KPIs that are relevant in this journey? Rich, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I think that KPIs are tied to the business processes and the strategic goals that the organization has. So I would say that, first start by understanding what are the strategic goals that the organization wants to have, that the organization wants to realize, and define the KPIs around those. So if it's increasing customer self-service, then that becomes a strategic imperative, and we can begin taking a look at what parts of the existing landscape or existing application portfolio are opportunities to increase customer self-service and define KPIs around those. So KPIs, I think, are focused on measurable business outcomes, which should be a key component of any digital transformation initiative.
All right, thank you for that. We have a couple more questions for you. Next up, is data cleansing a subset of app modernization, or is it not related?
Ron, did you want to handle that, or should I take it?
Yes, we think it is. I mean, you can talk about, Rich, if you want to. You can talk about how your solution addresses that, but it absolutely, from our perspective, makes sense that you would do the cleansing as part of the application modernization, because not only would you be moving the business functions piece by piece as I described, but as part of that, it would make sense to clean up the data as much as possible so that when you're in those modern environments, you have the most current, accurate data that's available. Do you have anything to expand on that, Rich?
Yeah, maybe just a little bit. One of the things that we see pretty common, especially in financial systems and insurance systems, is data lineage questions, where an application may be responsible for financial communications or compliance reporting, but the application was designed, 15, 20 years ago, and the rules for that compliance reporting, for example, are not well understood. We know the outcome, we know what comes out of the application, but how did the application consolidate that information or aggregate that information, and what rules were applied to it are lost in time. And so we find that understanding data lineage does become a fundamental part of modernization projects. So it's not necessarily data cleansing, but understanding of how those values are derived.
All right, thank you very much. Next question. Does ISAT handle only source code or also some dynamic information slash log?
Yeah, so the ISAT only handles source code. What is input to the ISAT is source code, which includes things like JCL, copybooks, and procedures, screens, transaction definitions. It does not include any end data or any information or logs. Now, that's not to say that one couldn't include analyzing logs in conjunction with what's being discovered within a application. A good example of that would be requirements that are non-functional requirements. So if we wanted to understand what are the performance requirements for a particular set of functionality, probably the best way to do that is to take a look at reporting information. That information can also be brought into the ISAT in the form of the business alignment process, so that we can see those correlations within the ISAT. All right, so in summary, we do not directly bring in information like dynamic information logs. We can take the results of the analysis of those logs and bring that metadata, if you will, into the ISAT repository.
All right, and to tack onto that, here's another question for you. What would be the optimum effort reduction that can be achieved by ISAT for code analysis and BRE?
Yeah, what we see today is a 30-fold increase over manual and utility, augmented approaches, and that's through a combination of two factors. One, by leveraging the ISAT's ability to focus in on the parts of the application that contain the most value. And then the second is by the automated techniques within the ISAT to do business rule identification. So the combination of those two items can lead to a 30-fold productivity increase, which is really quite dramatic.
All right. I believe this next question is for Ron. How can I see more results from the ISG Digital Capability Survey?
Yes, so actually the survey results will be used in ISG research reports that are coming up this year. So keep a lookout for those on various subjects surrounding digital transformation that the ISG Insights group will be preparing. There will also be presentation of some of the results in the digital business summits that are coming up next week in London and then September here in the US. So throughout the different events and publications, you will be seeing more of that data.
Okay, thank you, Ron. And one more, if you want to take this. I've never seen the ISG Digital Capability Model. Is it new?
Yes, it is. In fact, it is being rolled out by ISG Marketing tomorrow, and you'll be able to go to the ISG website to get more information about the Cube and digital transformation and everything we're doing in that realm. So tomorrow, take a look at the ISG-1.com website. You'll be able to see more about the Cube.
Hey, Ron, and just to add on to that a bit, we also have, or I should say ISG has produced a white paper on this topic that we will be distributing to everyone who's attended this webinar. And that white paper has more information on the ISG Cube.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we have time for one more question for the AveriSource team. What industries seem to have the greatest need to apply AveriSource's methodologies to solve their business problems?
Yeah, good question. Amazon and Netflix and Facebook are probably not good candidates. Organizations that have been around more than 10 years are. So really, we are a cross-industry platform or solution. We tend to see quite a bit of concentration in financial services and insurance, but also in travel and transportation and manufacturing. Really, any industry that has been in existence for more than the last 20 years, where companies have applications that were built, at least 15 years ago. The government is also a very large market for us, if you will. Organizations like the Social Security Administration have some 60 million lines of legacy code and a $10 billion budget to try and figure out how to modernize that. Very large and daunting problems.
All right, thank you, Rich. Thanks, everyone. This does conclude our time today. Thank you for joining this ISG Smart Talk. As mentioned, a recording of this Smart Talk will be available to share with your colleagues at the same link as the live event. For a copy of the ISG Insights and AveriSource Thought Leadership paper that accompanies this webinar, please visit averisource.com/ISG-whitepaper. If you'd like to speak with Ron, Stanton, or any of our ISG advisors, please reach out to us at www.isg-one.com. You can also visit AveriSource online at averisource.com. Thanks very much for listening.